Welcome everybody to another Legal Tech Talk session. My name is Frances Anderson, the MD of Netlaw Media. Now, we've still got people joining us, but I know time is of the essence, and we also have a slight spring twist to this event. So I know things are going to be clock watched quite accordingly, so we can get to what will be happening later in this session. So I'm delighted to say that today's in conjunction with Checkpoint. Now we're going to be looking at navigating the threat landscape, the modern approach, which will be chaired by Janet Day. Now this session is looking at something which is quite close to everybody's, I suppose, quite close to most businesses. So we're going to be looking at the increase in sophisticated cyber attacks and the pressure that security teams are under to protect organizations while understaffed, under-equipped and under budget. What would be the modern approach? We're going to be looking at this and much, much more sort of in detail. So now, leading into Janet, I'm going to give a brief introduction to her, who many of you know, and for those who don't, Janet has worked in the broad sphere of legal IT virtually her whole life. Even her MBA specialty was competitive advantage in the legal profession. After working in administration in A&O, Janet set up a specialist consultancy practice looking at technology services in the wider sense for legal firms. She joined BLP over 19 years ago, initially as a consultant, but later as the IT director with a wide range of responsibilities. Now, before I hand over to our esteemed guests, who you will see, and our chair of today's roundtable, as indicated, today's session has a slight twist insofar that we'll be delighted to welcome Hugh Anderson, the founder of Dalton Distillery, who'll be hosting a gin cocktail making session with us following the panel at 4 o'clock, where we're going to encourage all of you listening today to ask questions live, and the panel will be also, allowing you and welcoming you to activate your cameras to join into the networking element, which will be taking place later as well. So to ask questions, as you know, put up your hand, put through the chat function, through the Q&A at the bottom of your window. Now, without further ado, I think I've done enough talking. Janet, it's over to you.
Thank you, Frances, and welcome everyone who's joined this call. I understand that I am, along with my much more erudite panelists, the obstacle between you all and the gin cocktail. So I do my best to make it sufficiently exciting for you to think you didn't mind waiting till 4 o'clock for your gin. I'm very thrilled today to have two panelists who are really expert in the field of cybersecurity and the threat landscape. And so I'd like to invite them each to introduce themselves, and I've asked them to spend just a little bit of time explaining why they're here, what their background is, and therefore what information and knowledge and experience they bring to this particular event. So Ned, may I ask you to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Ned Stevanovsky, Head of IT, Ops and Security at Mishkondareya. Been with the firm for more than, I guess, 10, 11 years now, and have responsibility in technology and cybersecurity. Today, part of this session with Checkpoint is looking at some of the risks the law firm face, and we'll be discussing some of the challenges that we've seen from our side.
Thank you very much, Ned. Grant.
Janet, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Ned. Thank you. So I'm with Checkpoint Software. I've actually was Checkpoint's first worldwide evangelist in the spring of 1998 when they made their first acquisition. That's a little trivia bonus. If anybody knows that company, there's no fingerprints left. I've since returned to Checkpoint after their acquisition of a company called Dome9, which is focused on the cloud security posture management space and has really formed the foundation for our overall cloud platform. I fell into this industry in 1983. I couldn't spell computer, and it's been a heck of a ride ever since, and I'm looking forward to contributing to the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Grant. So as you can see, those of you in the audience, we have two experts with us. Now, let me sort of set some rules of engagement out. I'm going to pose a couple of questions to Ned and Grant, which they're going to spend a bit of time answering. But if things occur as they're answering or as the event progresses and you would like to make a point, drop it into the chat, and between Francis and me and the team at NetLaw, we will do our very best to make sure that we pick up your questions. If there are questions at the end of the session that we haven't been able to get to, please don't get in a panic, because I know that NetLaw will be following up and make sure that you get an answer to anything that you do raise. So without further ado, I'd like to sort of turn to Ned and Grant and just, I think, ask them both to explore that we live in a changed world. You know, none of us thought 2 years ago that we would all be sitting at home, study at your kitchen table, wherever it is, working actually incredibly productively, because I think we all know now we can do it well. But I don't think we realised what the challenges would be, and particularly what this changed landscape did to the threat environment. So Ned, perhaps you would like just to start on that one.
Sure. So you're absolutely right. The landscape is changed, and I think it's important to look at some of the threats that we and the world is facing, and some of the stats. Apparently, a ransomware attack happens every 11 seconds somewhere in the world, which is staggering. And the cost of ransomware and cybersecurity attacks to firms is more than $100 million a day. And of all those attacks, about 86% are financially motivated. So this is a huge industry, and legal firms are not excluded at all. To add on that complexity, obviously we live in an age of edge computing, the cloud, and as of late COVID-19, where our workforce is very distributed. The traditional network topology of hub and spoke, where remote users will connect via VPN and consume services and data, no longer works. It's no longer appropriate for the modern day. It's not appropriate because we consume more and more SaaS-based applications. And connecting back to a data center somewhere in a building or somewhere in London and then going back to the internet is not really an efficient way. And therefore, and at the same time, law firms have challenges, like we said at the beginning. We don't have the resources to be able to respond accordingly. And it's a challenge that will persist, and it will continue because cyber attacks are on rise each year. Apparently 15 to 20% each year we're seeing a rise of cyber attacks. And at the same time, the complexity of what we're managing and what we need to protect is also getting more and more complex. So from the legal perspective, it is time for, I think it's a good opportunity to change, look at possible options, moving systems to cloud, using modern technology to protect. Because the traditional way of having layers and layers of physical devices, of firewalls, on networking devices, anti-malware, IPS, IDS, you name it, it no longer works if all your services are in the cloud. So a more modern architecture is required. Things like SASE, like CASB, are now in place and offer simplicity. It's based on identity, it recognizes users, and it offers that additional layer of security for what we need to use services from the cloud.
Thank you, Ned. Ned, just before I move on to ask Grant, can I just ask you to think about whether you think there are any particular occurrences in the current landscape which apply specifically to professional service organizations or to law firms?
Yeah, and I think we are increasingly becoming a target, because attackers know that we deal with a lot of financial transactions. So naturally, that is very attractive for them, and we're seeing more and more of this. And I think it's important to know that most of these attacks will come via phishing attempt. About 80% of those of successful attacks are usually done via phishing. So I think the emphasis on law firm, on end user training and education, I think is paramount, is very crucial.
Okay, thank you very much. Grant.
Well, look, there's significant and major transformational changes that are occurring globally, right? Because of the pandemic, we're all told to go home and be effective. But if we look within our industry specifically, there's also significant transformational changes, not the least of which you've already said, and you're spot on. Organizations have to recalibrate their overall security strategy around a model that has the highest percentage of their users being mobile or remote. This is a must. It's not an option. And when you step back and you look at the multiple products that have, my mind's eye, I'm a graphic imagery guy, and I think of a snowball accumulating and it picks up pine cones and sticks as it's going. That's what's happened to our endpoint security. And now we've got these, all these different products that we're trying to pull together and work effectively as one. It's why we need to recalibrate. And in fact, we did research that says about 74% of enterprises expect to continue this hybrid work model, even post-pandemic. And just to touch on a couple of interesting stats, because I love them and they get stuck in my head. You're talking about phishing. Oh my word, phishing. Do you realize phishing attacks increased in Q2 2020 3,900%. Why? Because the bad guys know all of us are being forced to go work with this new stuff that we may or may not really understand. The company may or may not taken the steps to properly secure. So I found that extraordinary. And here's the other one to your point, Ned. Ransomware. Ransomware costs businesses $20 billion in 2020, and that's up from $11.5 billion in 2019. Nearly doubled. Again, really highlighting the forced reprioritization. And then the last thing I'll throw in to kind of mix up the pot here. We all put together these 3 new priorities, right? Remote users, mobile security, cloud and hybrid cloud, because everything's going to the cloud to support those mobile users. And then SolarWinds took place. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a devastating blow because we all read in the newspaper that, oh, these guys are attacking the US federal government agencies. But do you know that Orion is used by over 18,000 companies around the world? So this breach literally could be everywhere. And what it did is it rattled all our cages because now not only are we questioning the systems we use to build and manage our systems, we're really starting to question the very systems themselves. And so it's lots of changes going on for sure, Janet.
Yes, it is a frightening landscape, and you're right. The whole issue about the attacks certainly at the very public attacks at the tail end of last year were really quite frightening. Public ransomware attacks on law firms. You rightly highlight the incredible attack on a security provider, which really,
our attack surface globally has never been as big as it is today. And I suspect some of our guests recall reading last week that a casino in Las Vegas was breached because of a thermometer in an aquarium. So ladies and gentlemen, we've got IoT issues too.
You bring me beautifully to the point that I think is incredibly relevant, that okay, we've all been sent home and we're all busily, productively working at home, but home's a very interesting environment, isn't it? For those of us who live in our own house, that's probably quite straightforward. We can probably broadly secure our physical infrastructure around us. But for people who are working from their bedsit or from a shared flat or things like this, then there's a whole plethora of security, which is not just cyber. It's just plain straightforward people, place, print, things like that. Ned, how are Mishcons going about dealing with that sort of broader threat landscape?
So you're absolutely right on the challenges, and we had to deal with this on a larger scale, obviously, at the beginning of the pandemic, but we had to extend and go beyond and look at what other challenges we have with working at home. So, for example, we decided to advise our users not to have any confidential meetings if they have any personal assistant devices near them, things like Siri, things like Google, Alexa, and you name it. Those potentially, we already know that they listen. We already know that some of that text could be read by humans, and it's in a different jurisdiction. So we've decided to advise our users to ensure that any confidential meetings are held in a room where no such technology exists. So you have to look at it more holistic way, and it's not just about, you're absolutely right, the print is important, and especially if you're in a shared flat, you have to manage that. So that's something that we had to do at the beginning, advise every user, provide a guidance on what good security looks like at home.
And it's a very broad question, isn't it, as to what does good security look like? Because I think so many people have got used to the concept that actually, you know, you're secure, you've logged onto the internet, you've gone through the performance of accessing your firm's environment, whatever that performance has been, and therefore it must be secure. And we're coming in via unprotected networks and things like that. So have you also given advice on things like that?
We have, and I think we at the beginning of COVID, we accelerated our digital transformation, and what we've done is we actually got rid of our data centers. So we are fully in the cloud, 100%, and we're moving away from traditional VPN into using a SASE environment, which is the modern way. Modern architecture is scalable, it's elastic, and we don't have the traditional issues that you get with VPNs when you saturate the number of users. When you saturate the link, everyone suffers with performance. Where in the modern way, connectivity, you inspect the traffic for the SASE applications that you're protecting, you know the users, you can set geofencing boundaries, and you can set more granular rules.
Okay, thank you. Grant, broadening this out slightly, but still on the same topic of the wider threat environment, so it not just being cyber, you touched on you know, the market reaction to a supplier being attacked. Coming from the supplier community, how do you deal with ensuring your customers and clients are using what you provide correctly and sensibly, so not making themselves vulnerable? Do you take that on as part of your mantra?
We sure do. And in fact, you know, Checkpoint's a unique organization in that we don't sell directly to any end user customer. We're 100% channel oriented, partner oriented. And so we work very closely with our partners to emphasize professional services, training, and the like. And so we understand that having the tool is one thing, having the tool deployed and used properly is another, and obviously much more critical. I want to pull on a thread that Ned mentioned, and Ned, no disrespect, my friend, I don't want to throw any shade on the comment, but I do want to suggest it's not going to work. And what I'm talking about, I'll bring it to you in a little bit of a different way. I suspect there's got to be a guest or attendee that knows someone or they themselves have recently purchased a new vehicle. No? So if you look at those new vehicles, Ned, did it come with a 2-week defensive driving course?
It didn't.
Did it come with anything to teach you how to not turn in front of a turning vehicle or not pull out in front of a speeding car on the motorway?
It didn't.
But it'll park for you. It'll brake for you. It'll adaptively speed up and slow down for you. It'll pull itself back into the lane if it sees that you're starting to fade out. My point, is, as much as I love the notion of having all of us be smarter and not clicking on links and not downloading the spreadsheet to see how come our shipment didn't make it and not responding to the guy with the $1 million in Africa, right? I mean, I have great hopes, but the reality, the data, the proof is it fails. So we have to continue to build in intelligence to protect ourselves from ourselves. And that's what I think we are seeing in the world, you know, going back to your question, Janet, about making sure tools are being used properly. A big trend, and I suspect you're familiar with this, Ned, is the shift left move for security, pushing it more into your supply chain so that no developer ever hits commit on code that isn't first interrogated for security. So while I love the notion of training people, I really don't think that's going to be the solution. As long as we have human beings, we're going to have problems. We're going to have to find ways to get around them.
So you're looking for a dehumanized working population, are you?
No, not at all. In fact, I think what I want to do and what I see is I see more of the mundane, rudimentary, error-prone tasks to be automated and moved away so that you can start to really exercise innovation and improvements as opposed to, you know, tacking down kind of the blocking and tackling functions.
Okay. So I just want to stick on this point about supplier and consumer responsibility in here. I might take issue, I think, a bit with Grant on the idea that training the users is almost a waste of time, but we'll come back to that. But Ned, how do you feel the relationship between you as a consumer of security services and the supplier should operate to everyone's benefit?
Supplier risk management, it's a hot topic, and I think everyone is doing more, and I don't think enough is done already. What's annoying, especially in the legal space, is that we all do assessments individually, and often we don't join forces. So a lot of time is spent and effort is ensuring that we have the right suppliers and the right technology stacks and the right checks have been done in the background. I think there's more to be done. I think there may be an opportunity for a wider group, some automated way of assessing suppliers, so we don't have to spend the days and days on the same thing, asking the same questions. At this stage, I think often the suppliers are our weakest link, because as we know, often it happens that they don't have the right security controls and practices in place, and like Grant said, they submit code that's not properly checked, and then we end up being breached. And therefore we have to do go the extra mile, ensuring that we've done the right checks, ensuring there's the right technology for us, and ensuring that they have the right processes in place.
Which I think is fine when you are a firm of the scale that you are, but for smaller organisations, it's quite tricky to work out how they can go about doing those checks. Do you not think?
Oh, absolutely, and I feel for the small organisations, absolutely. And this is why, again, going back to the comment, someone else have done the checks already, so I think everyone is duplicating work. And we may need to do a bit of innovation, like Grant mentioned, to come up with a way of vetting suppliers and ensuring that we do the work once.
Okay, so sort of a kite mark on the supplier.
Yeah.
Grant, now you can come back and tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. In fact, I think one of the things that's occurring currently, combined with all of these changes and transformations and realigning strategies, is, you know, according to the International Monetary Fund, 2021, we're going to return to economic growth, but do you know that it's actually 6.5% less than it was before the pandemic? So, and another interesting stat, Wedbush says that there's going to be a 20% increase in cybersecurity spend. So the equation looks like this. Every attendee in this meeting right now, their organization is wrestling with doing an increase in cyber with less of everything else. It's truly that age-old do more with less. And we believe this is going to accelerate the view on the part of executives like Ned to say, hey, we need to step back and look at how we can consolidate to bring greater efficiencies and improve our overall threat profile by having the ability to share threat intelligence across your network, your cloud, your endpoint, your access points, right? So this is a big transformation also, because for years and years and years, we've been in this game of, okay, what's best of breed, right? And then we just notice that all of a sudden, I've got 27, 37, 57 different products, and companies have evolved. I mean, Checkpoint's over 25 years old. So if you start to actually look at what architecture has been stitched together by vendors, you can actually see a pretty exciting and significant opportunity to consolidate and improve the overall efficacy. But that's not been our motion. Our motion's always been, what is it? Oh, it's we're doing intrusion detection, we're doing anti-malware, and we kind of zero down as opposed to stepping back, because the fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, everything is connected now. I mean, I've got my mobile supercomputer, wherever it is. Oh, it's right here in my pocket. But this supercomputer is connected to everything that this laptop is connected to. I bought this at the AT&T store. This computer I got from my company. So we have to think differently. Everything's connected. We have to work smarter.
Okay, so you're actually suggesting that we're being required to do more with less, and yet it's my experience that the one budget at the moment that is under less attack than any other budget is the budget that looks at security. Now, what's your view?
I'm sorry, what I was suggesting is the data says the overall organization will have less money. That's not to say that they're not going to find it to increase the budget, but it's going to put pressures.
Okay, and just to come back on that, Grant, that might be true in a lot of industries. Interestingly, the out term for the year, which either ended in December last year or will end in a couple of days' time at the end of April this year, looks as though law firms are anywhere between 11 and 20% up.
Wow.
So that's a contra trend to everything else. So Ned.
Yeah, it really is.
So from our perspective, because we accelerated our digital transformation, we had to invest in security. You can't move to the cloud unless you have the right controls in place, because you are completely risking the operation. So from our perspective, we've seen a huge increase in not just resources, in budgets as well, to ensure that we have the controls, the tools, the people that can respond and meet the demands for the business. And for us, it's slightly more complicated because Mishcon is not just a law firm. It's a group of companies that spans legal, financial services, cybersecurity, and different countries around the world. So we had to think what is the best approach and how do we ensure that we can support the growth of the firm. So we've seen an increase in spend. Yeah,
that's what I would have expected you to have said. My experience is that most law firms have accepted almost philosophically that security, because we've increased the risk profile around the way we operate, we've got to actually mitigate that risk. Otherwise, the clients will vote with their feet. So we can't afford that threat. So we're talking carefully at the moment about the environment in which we're operating. I think we've all got a faint but fervent hope that we will eventually come out of this pandemic. So what should we be doing to start thinking about planning for what, say, this time next year is going to be like, where I'm sure we won't have gone back to going into the office 5 days a week. I can't believe the human working race will tolerate that position. So what things should we be starting to think about to prepare ourselves for an even more hybrid working environment than we have at the moment? Grant, do you want to take a shot at that one?
Boy, that's a little bit of a crystal ball, isn't it, Janet? I know we at our headquarters have been doing a great deal of work investigating the new workplace and what's going to be required. And we found that there are some people that want to come into the office nearly every day. And then there's another portion that really want to keep this hybrid model. And so what we've actually built out is our workplaces now will have some permanent, and the majority will be where you call in the day before and you make a reservation and they'll give you a seat number, and so, and it'll be very controlled. And I think that we're going to start to put people in more defined areas, right? But from a cyber perspective, I think, Ned hit on the big trend to secure access service edge, SASE. It's critical. Organizations, I think, are going back and filling in the gaps that they realized they had as they raced to send everybody home to shelter in place. And so I think that's where you'll see a lot of investment and focus on getting the grout between all of the bricks so that we can continue to operate in this new normal.
Okay, thank you. Grant, Ned, I think as I understand it, quite a lot of people and I'm seeing the chat coming through, people in the audience are suggesting they believe that lawyers will go back almost 100%. What's your take on that?
I think they might be right. We're seeing the same feedback. But I think going back to what we said earlier, and Grant mentioned that the cloud is here to stay, and the cloud is the future, and the distributed computing is here to stay. And I think from our perspective on the question of what we should be doing next year, and I think we shouldn't, because if lawyers are returning back in the office, we shouldn't just go back to normal. I think it's an opportunity to change, to improve, to innovate. And in my view, if organizations and law firms specifically should accelerate their transformation, and for things like DMS, if it's not in the cloud, you really should be moving in the next year, because again, there are added benefits from cybersecurity perspective, ensuring that you don't actually get ransomware attacks, and then move on. And if you can focus on a SaaS-based applications, it will give you more and more granular control and a reduced risk.
Okay, I think that is a very interesting take on it. It's fascinating how the threat landscape has changed. So 10 years ago, anybody mentioning the word that sort of looked like not on premises or not locked up in a data center storage would have gone grey overnight. And then 5 years ago, we started to murmur about cloud, but people got deeply worried. And then suddenly in the last 15, 18 months, we've all suddenly realized that it's just conceivable, isn't it, that with the millions that Microsoft spend on this, they might be getting their security strategy really quite right, all things being considered. Grant, do you think this move to the cloud has an impact from you as a supplier's perspective?
Oh, unequivocally, I think it's terrific. What we're seeing is, in this industry, if you go way back to when I first got into it and couldn't spell computer, we had a cloud. It was called the mainframe. It was my cloud and you had your cloud and everybody had their own cloud, right? I mean, so from that perspective, the model of computing somewhere else and I get the data on a screen has been around for a while. So obviously we are far, far advanced. I think the combination of bandwidth, compute, and connectivity, it's those three that have just been transformational. Because now, as I already mentioned, I got a supercomputer with me. It goes with me everywhere I go. And I'm connected 24/7, 365. And so from my perspective, the cloud is going to be the way people compute for the next many generations. It's going to prevail. We may see more fog, what's referred to as fog, where computing will get pushed closer and closer to us. But when we're having to, do a legal search on 20 petabytes of data, it'll be easier to be done in the cloud, and you're going to get the answer so fast you won't know that it wasn't on the local machine that you're on. So, it's really, for me, I'm super excited about where the world's going and how we've moved to cloud. I think what you're starting to see is you're starting to actually see a bit of a stratification in cloud providers, are getting stronger in what they do very well. And certainly Microsoft, you mentioned, never count them out. They are the steady Eddie, always in your rearview mirror. And evidence is their constant steady pressure on cloud. And certainly their Trojan horse of Office and Windows, and probably most significantly Active Directory. This is a huge barb for them to hook you into their cloud. Do you think Amazon cares about Active Directory? Right? So, it's really interesting when you step back and you look at how the cloud providers got to where they are. Amazon solved their own problem and created elastic compute. Microsoft looked across Lake Washington and said, holy moly, we got to get moving. And they look for ways to add greater value. They're all summiting the same mountain. They're just taking different paths. And we're the benefactors because they're really getting very, very good at a number of really cool new capabilities. So I think the cloud is, remember virtualization, Janet?
Yeah,
Man,
I
I'm sure you do, right? We were all pulling our hair out because our appliances and servers running at 8 to 11% utilization, and we're still having to buy them and pay maintenance on them. And then, thank you, Stanford, we got virtualization, right? And all of a sudden, holy moly, I'm running at 60, 70%. It's awesome. But then Ned gets a phone call, and Janet saying, Ned, what's this inter-VM traffic? What's this vMotion stuff? And all of a sudden, we realized that we had new capabilities that we loved, but we needed new tools to be able to secure them, have visibility into them. Well, the late, great Yogi Berra said it, man. We're in deja vu all over again. It's only exacerbated because now Ned can spin up a new account in my Amazon account from over in England, even though I'm here, right? Anywhere on the planet. So it's things are changing quite a bit.
Definitely got an interest spot with you there, didn't I? Ned, do you want to come back in on that?
No, nothing further to add on that comment. I like it.
So Grant wiped out the whole conversation there. Yeah,
they did.
Okay. I want to swing slightly the axis because although we've been talking about, I think, the strict operation, the security, and the environment in which we're working, I want us to broaden our view of the threat environment and just think for a minute about what practical concerns should law firms have about the dark web and about the implications that something like that has on law practice. Ned?
The dark web. Okay. Well, for us, the implications around data leakage and what gets published on there and what gets advertised often is used for various things. And I think data, buying data there, it's one of the things that attackers will use. It's well known that you can buy a database with millions of records of email addresses for as little as $10 on the dark web. So I think what that creates a very easy and cheap access to data for criminals around the world. Without having too many tools, without having a big budgets, they can easily get to email addresses, easily get to tools to do attacks on firms. So I think we have to be aware what's there. We have to somehow monitor for our assets, for our data, to make sure that there isn't anything there that potentially it's of concern.
And what do you think we should be telling lawyers about this? mean, they will probably know the phrase, but do they perhaps understand the risk? Do we have a responsibility to make them understand it?
Not really. I think the general advice is don't act as the dark web, because that's the general advice. Don't act as the dark web, and only trained security professional really should do it, because accessing the dark web comes with risks, and there's all sorts of stuff on there that shouldn't be really looked at.
Okay, so this is definitely don't walk on the ice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Grant, your thoughts on that?
Well, you talk about the threat landscape, and the fact of the matter is, one of the things that I've always found more difficult is you have to think like a bad guy, right? Or like a bad girl. You have to be nefarious in your thoughts. And I honestly don't think that way. Most of us don't. And this is what really creates a dichotomy as we're building systems, because none of us would ever do some of the things that the bad guys actually come up with to find their way in. So that, I think, is just a challenge we all face every day, to think in the almost opposite way that we really consider the right way of thinking. You know what I'm saying? It's a challenge. But I think it's why, for example, in Israel, they do a lot in the 8200, right? That's their game. And that's why you've seen some tremendous effectiveness in terms of coming out with new solutions. I want to touch on how the threat landscape has evolved, and just to throw out some interesting considerations. When I got into this business, a virus would eat the characters on my screen. That was the damage, and it was frustrating, and you'd have to, reboot and reinstall or whatever. Fine, no problem. But if you look at what has happened over the last 3-4 decades, code has went from being an irritant to, we all know Stuxnet, kinetic physical damage. And then, about 2 or 3, 4 years ago, Johnson & Johnson had their really cool new ping insulin pump that had a vulnerability. And if I got into your insulin pump, I could administer a lethal dose of insulin. And so my point is, the threat landscape has went from being an irritant to potentially life-threatening. It's real, and it's everywhere in our lives. And I think we have to remember that. We have to look around and realize how connected our lives are, how connected the devices in our lives are, and the things that we use. And it has to force us to think, I'll give you a great example. I get LinkedIn requests all the time. I'm sure you do too, Janet, Ned. And, I get really leery when I get a LinkedIn request from someone from a foreign country that has 4 contacts, 4 connections in their entire, and no in common connections. Hey, I'm leery, because that's the kind of social engineering people will do. I got one just the other day from a lady named Nan. She says she lives in Seattle, but every time I try to communicate with her during 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Seattle time, she's not there, but I get messages from her at 10 at night. I mean, we have to be diligent about the world today.
Diligent about the world. Ned, come in on that. Diligent about the world. That's a real challenge, isn't it?
It is. And I think, just going back to what Grant mentioned around the threat landscape, as much as understanding the threat landscape is a big thing, but at the same time, I think understanding the assets and what data you have and where you have it, I think it's essential. And I think a lot of firms have invested money in technology, in controls, in processes, but maybe not enough done on identifying the assets they have and doing a proper risk management based on the assets, because you can't secure something that you don't know you have it.
Yes.
And most law firms, and I think going back to the IoT comment, most law firms have modern offices, and in those offices, there are meeting rooms with plethora of IoT devices, from control and automation on the blinds, on the projectors, and you name it. But has everyone done a risk assessment? Have they been considered in their security strategy? And I think it's important, again, to take a step back to do a proper analysis and an asset-based risk management approach.
That's a very interesting challenge. So I wonder how many firms have approached it that way. It would be interesting if anyone in the audience has a comment on that. It would be lovely to hear the thought about that sort of approach, because I can see you're right. You can't protect what you don't know you've got. Grant, your thought about that approach to security?
Unequivocally, the starting point for security, I don't care where, network, it doesn't matter, visibility. Can't see it, can't do anything about it. That's a fact. And you know, I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts, Ned, Janet, ladies and gentlemen, because from this, I always refer to myself as a Gilligan, the old Gilligan's Island show in America, right? I'm no professor, but from my perspective, our cadence started incorrectly when we started this whole thing, because we approached, I don't think any of us expected that this thing called the internet would become our corporate network, right? So that was one miscalculation. The other thing is, remember, the internet, well, I kind of liken it in my analogies to Woodstock. It's free love, baby. It's everybody come on, share, right? And that's how we said, hey, this great new swimming hole called the internet, woo, right? And everybody wants to connect. And then we started to go, wait a minute, we really should be conducting ourselves like we're at an opera, because I don't want anybody else coming into my room. I don't want anybody else sitting in my seat. I surely don't want anybody not dressed appropriately for my environment, right? So we took this Woodstock approach with the desire of an opera that's really highly controlled. And we have been fighting to get back to that ever since. And had we started out saying, Janet, this little thing called a packet, this is my data. I don't care about anything else, but I care about my data. How do I secure that? If we just started there and worked out, we'd certainly be in a really different world than we are today. But I think that's the challenge, right? We went from I trust anybody to now I'm supposed to be zero trust.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like taking the socks. You got to turn them inside out now, right? I mean, it's a real challenge. So I think that's something we will continue to wrestle with for years.
So aside from the challenge of the intergenerational comment about Woodstock, which might have left 50% of the
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all right, Grant. I'm old enough to know it, so you're fine with me.
Lovely.
But Ned, that concept of starting from a different point, where would we have ended? Your thoughts? I
mean, I agree with Grant, and earlier to my comment, you have to have the visibility, and of course we've started off from having mainframes, server rooms, you name it, and now the future is the cloud. And I think absolutely embrace the cloud, but at the same time have understanding of what's where, and make sure that the controls are there to give you that visibility so you can make decisions. You can't make a decision if you don't have the information. You can't protect the data if you don't see the data. And ensuring that you have that holistic approach for securing your assets and your data, I think it's very crucial.
Okay, I mean, I think that's true, and somebody from the audience has just commented that, you know, it's much wider than just this environment. People don't buy if they don't trust, and that's for sure. Yeah. But we touched on there, perhaps intentionally or maybe not intentionally, we touched on a generational point. And I just want to sort of look at it for a second and say, do we think, so we're very focused on security, on privacy, on not sharing information, but do we think that generationally the focus is going to be the same? Or will there be people who feel more open or more relaxed about this? Ned?
I think there's a bit of both. I think there's a bit of both because I think the security vendors will do more to include automation. To what we said earlier about the comment about the vehicle, there'll be more done in the background to ensure that you are safe. And I think the more we have of that, the better the experience for the end users, regardless of the age or location. So I think we need to spend more time on automation in the background to ensure that what we provide for our end users is secure and easily accessible.
Okay, Grant?
So, one of the things I kind of bifurcate users as immigrants and natives. Some immigrants are a little bit more savvy, but natives, they've had it their whole life. And the example I would use is if I say to my kid, hey, have you ever had rabbit ears? He's going to think I'm speaking of a rabbit, where, I'm talking about the things we adjusted on our television, right? There are those types of generational differences. And certainly for the natives, which are most of us, that most of the young workers, their view is different. Their view is different of technology overall. And I think it's why we have to have policies and programs in place to keep everybody inside the rails, whether you're a native or an immigrant, if you think there's a threat or there isn't a threat. I do want to mention one thing that I think is really important that I've learned from, I do a podcast called Talking Cloud, and I've done about, 29 episodes. And one of the things I've consistently heard, and I want to just throw out there, many times, look, we know what we know because that's what we've learned and what we know, right? And so 15 years, 20 years, however many years experience in cybersecurity on premise, and you're going to go build a data center in the cloud. So what do? Well, this is how we did it here. So it's how we're going to do it there, right? I mean, this is how we did it. This is how the biggest mistake I've been told is to go into the cloud and say, we're going to do it the same way we did it on prem. And so if there's a recommendation, another generational analogy, if you remember the Etch-a-Sketch, right? That little thing that, you draw with the little knobs, okay? Turn the Etch-a-Sketch over on premise and shake it, turn it over, and then re-architect your cloud. That's the way you don't do it the way you've always done it. Look at the new tools and try to go cloud native as much as you can. I don't know, Ned, if you want to add to that at all.
No, absolutely. Totally agree with your comments.
Right, okay. So we're into our closing 4 minutes now. And I'm going to ask you both if there's one thing you would want people to take away as maybe a hope for the future or a concern for the future. What's the thing that we should all be addressing or thinking or being concerned about? Ned?
Sure. I think from my perspective, embrace technology and embrace the cloud. The cloud is the future. The quicker you move in the cloud, the better for everyone else, because you get more visibility, more control, more scalability, and better end user experience. So if you've not done it already, I think you should be looking the next 12 months.
Okay, so it's definitely cloud first, cloud first, cloud first.
Cloud first.
I think you might have swallowed the Microsoft mantra there. Grant?
Step back. Don't step in. Step back. Look holistically at your cybersecurity architecture, the fabric you've stitched together to secure it, and really look at how you can do more with less by consolidating.
So you're after us doing more with less. You're after that consolidation piece. I think that's. I think I'm. Sorry.
No, just to finish out, my point is threat intelligence is absolutely tantamount. I mean, we collect it to make our systems and devices more intelligent, right? We learn about a threat, we figure out how to thwart it, and then we distribute that out. And where before we used to, be really in silos. I was on my network, I was on my mobile. Now it is one big harmonizing, homogenizing bowl. And so that threat intelligence that I have gathered from my network needs to be shared across those other parts of the organization. And so that's why when you consolidate, you can start to look to leveraging a common threat intelligence across all of those vectors.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you both. And because I don't want to be the obstacle between the audience and Hugh Anderson, who I see has joined us from Downton Distillery, I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking both Ned and Grant for their contribution. I would also like to thank the audience for a fascinating sideline discussion about corgis, the Queen, and e-scooters, but we won't necessarily get a chance to go through all that. And finally, I'd like to thank Francis and the team at Netlaw Media for making this event possible. And I'm delighted that we now have an opportunity to be a bit more social with each other and chat. So gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And Francis, I hand back to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ned, Grant and Janet. It was really interesting. And yes, some interesting comments about e-scooters. And I'm glad, Carl, I know you're online, that you don't trust them. What I would like to do is now welcome Hugh Anderson, who is the founder of Downton Distillery, which I'm delighted that Checkpoint has brought in today to do a little bit of cocktail making with us all, which is great on a lovely sunny afternoon. So Hugh, I'm going to hand it over to you, and everybody do join us. You can put your videos on, you can interact, do ask Hugh questions, you can ask Checkpoint questions, and I look forward to chatting with you all soon as well.
Right, I think I can see everyone. Hopefully everyone should have received their bomb-proof package via the mail. And within your package, you'd have received a small can of tonic water. You would have received a small bottle of Explorers, a botanical vial, and a cocktail straw. Right, so onto our cocktail. And you're going to need your glass, you're going to need your 50 ml bottle, and you are going to need some ice. And if you've got your peeler next door to you, grab your peeler, and we're going to garnish your G&T with orange peel. And what I'd like you to do is pour 25 ml of your Explorer's gin into the glass. So half the bottle initially. I would then actually add your ice. Perhaps top it up with however much tonic water you would like. I'm not going to pour in a whole can. I'm going to probably just pour in half, so it's half-half. And then with your peeler, with whatever citrus fruit that you would like to place in it, I am putting in a peel of orange. Now with peel, going into a G&T, I would always suggest, if at all possible, not to get the white pith into your spirits. And the reason for that is white pith is very bitter. So if you can remove the pith, you've actually then got the oils that are held within the citrus rind. And it's those oils that will actually give you the flavor within your cocktail. And then with your rind, just quickly wipe the rim of the glass because you've got the zest there and it's going. And there we go. Cheers to your first cocktail. Hopefully the start of your weekend.